Turn mic on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. Oh, bit of a scramble there. Today marks the first day of I am trying to have an actual schedule. We will be posting streams and planning streams a little bit more in advance. Normally, I'm also going to be trying to start a little bit sooner, especially when we're doing chiller gaming streams. But before we get too much further into that, let's check in with our kitties. Let's see. That is Ember or Sky at the top of the window tree. I think it's Ember. Sky tends to take up more of that platform. We have Mason on the bed, and Sherbet is in the play area. Well, briefly, or partially. He's at the edge of it wandering around. I have discovered a new spot they like to sit. I have a fabric laundry hamper that is near the bed, and I will occasionally see one of them kind of peeking out of it. Is that Sammy there? Okay, that is Ember in the window tree. Sammy was near the play area, bottom left, and Sky's getting some food. Set that camera. Now, we're going to try to get our player state rolling again. We had a bit of a medical scramble with Sky last time we tried this. That is largely resolved. The eye drops are doing work. At this point, it's the equivalent of, a nasty cold or congestion kind of thing. But it's an eye infection and it's cats, so it looks horrifying. But that has fallen off. Okie doke. So player state is meant to be like HP and the like. It's also going to be where we put hidden stats, that kind of thing. Hello, Ember. As I see you're explaining, it is now time for pets. Come on now. She wants to be held like a baby. So initially we're going to put some health values in there. Exactly how we're going to handle health is still up in the air. And how intricate I want to make the state is still up in the air. Like at the moment, we have a concept of an inventory and inventory items. I feel like our actual inventory... This is another one of our problems. We have the visual inventory. We have the actual inventory. So the inventory is a separate kind of service that wrangles items coming in, going out, interacting with them, that kind of thing. For one, we need to make sure that we are not relying on the physics tick right here to do any of our work as far as triggering items. We have a master physics tick at the moment because we do want to have control over the sequence of events. It is kind of important that we know like which part of the physics tick happens when so that we can plan for it. Those plans may change in the future, but doing it this way also lets us handle things like pausing very gracefully. And since our physics system is completely disparate from or outside of Godot, we might as well keep going this way. Okay. So this is the inventory part. This is where we are launching the bullets. And part of the reason that I do want to move this out of there is we need to have things like starting point handlers. Like where to emit them from. Most bullets will come from the player. Those are the easy ones. But if we look at things like Vampire Survivors Lightning Strike and Holy Water and a whole lot of the later ones, where the effects are maybe centered around the player, but appear in different spots. Now, I could handle that in movement logic. I could handle that in initial movement logic as a single shot, such that when it first appears and moves, it sends itself to its starting position. The difficulty with that is the possibility of an entity appearing at the player, and it's not until the first frame update that you see it appear elsewhere. That is, we're rendering more frequently than we're moving, so each entity has time to be where it currently is before we get visual updates. What that might mean is that we need a special category of items for weapons, and that those entities, when they are created, when we initially emit them, have logic for where they are created. So again, right here. And here is the blob spawn code, all hard-coded right now. We should actually be handling this differently. We should copy the entity and then we should mess with it. But given that the entities are already copies that live in a collection, it's not really an issue. Hello, Strawberry. Welcome. We're just getting started. I'm largely talking through what we're going to be trying to do today, or the area that we're going to be living. Sip a beverage. So this will have to change, but again, that's coming later. Similarly, this is all going to go away. So need to make sure. Yeah. So one of the things we'll also need to do is go into the items and make sure that there is a way for the system to know how to handle them when they are obtained, instead of us explicitly saying it. It's like right down here we have add entity, add behavior. Add entity is for a weapon, or in the case of the blobs, an enemy, but they are entity objects, and then behaviors are behavior objects. The different ones have different constraints as to where they appear in your inventory on the screen, and then they have a functional difference, as this is the thing that will be created, like the yarn ball, and then the behaviors are used to create the modified entity that will be copied. The entity that we see here. So this group of entity in templates, each of these are already modified to account for the structure of all these behaviors, the patterns that are created. Build templates logic here. And we have, there's our process of building it. We empty it out. We go through all of them. We're getting we go through each row, and the first thing we do is we get the first one. So which row are we on? Get the first cell. That is our entity. Items are all items, but if it's here, this is the thing we're copying. This can create some issues. But if we control it well enough, since this is just a grid of items, if we properly control it by looking at what the items are, then we can avoid any issues with it. That if it says it's a behavior, we treat it like a behavior. Will the game have problems if it's not? Yes, but that's on us for building it that way. I'm sorry, for configuring the items that way. Okay, processing. So we've got all this. This will need to get converted. It's probably going to be happening somewhere next. I don't know that we need to change the UI and the inventory to be inside the player state, as in to have their functioning consumed. I think they can still be services in their own right, and that we don't have to put them in the state. There can just be cross communication. Anywho, so I'm thinking for now we're going to have the concept of health, and it's a private double. Hello, Sherbet. Ember has moved over across from the keyboard, and Sherbet has seized the opportunity to jump up on my headrest and put his tail curled up in front of me. Like, he is behind my head, and his tail keeps poking my nose. So we'll have health as a double. Now, the initial pass is going to have it as treated as an integer. We're going to do the like number of hearts route. Your Binding of Isaac kind of stuff. Or your original Zeldas. Actually, even the newer Zeldas. They've been pretty consistent about heart containers. I know Zelda 2 didn't have actual visible hearts. But they were still segments. They were still the equivalent of you have integer units that are removed based on a fixed value. There isn't like a sliding meter kind of thing. But in that regard, that's an integer. Because we don't need... Even if it's a sliding bar, we don't need fractions. Okay, so this is a service. We have health values. Player stat calls base. What is it, Sherbet? Giving him some attention. One of these days, he will get comfy enough to allow me to trim his nails. And he just turned around and flopped over harder. Knocked me forward a bit. His front claws are real fish hooks at this point. When he's walking on a soft surface, he does a little bit of a, lizard on a hot surface. Paw up kind of thing, because he has to pull the paws free before he can move. Okay, so we have a health value now. We need to have... our full collision. We're going to go to entities. We're going to go to our interactions. Actually, oh, that's right. We stopped using those. Behaviors. We have message types. So we have harm messages. It's going to be relevant. And these are the types of events that get emitted. We are going to have a player health type. So this is a receiving collision. As in, it is looking for this message. It's not looking for a standard collision event. So a collision message here, a harm message, it wants harm messages. That's what it cares about. The inflict harm collision is an outgoing one. It wants collision messages. It only cares, did I run into something? If I did, hurt it. Currently, the thing that we've got using that are the bullets, and the bullets hit the blobs, and the blobs take damage. We're going to attach this same thing to the blobs so that when they hit a player, since those are the only things they can hit, they will send a harm message. The player is going to have a player health, a collision player health event, or collision behavior here. And all that's going to do primarily is talk to the player state, and tell it, hey, here's a harm message. Just my posture. This will sadly drive off Sherbet. Yeah, sorry, buddy. Oh, no, it didn't. Got back into position. He's like, nope. So I've still got a heated neck pillow here. Yeah, I'm aware, buddy. Partial. I'm sure there's a project setting somewhere where I can make it not do that. Add some defaults, you know? Ooh, I need a constructor for that. This is Coding and Stream of Consciousness, so if you have questions or you just want to chat, please do. There is no issue with pausing a little bit or explaining things more. What? Scratching his back, and I stopped, and he had to dig in and rebalance. Done? You can't hear it, but he's got a kind of a quiet trill voice. Quickly, just a second here. You're in the way, bud. Just a second. There we go. He was doing a slow meander. The layout of the HID stuff here. For one, I have what I refer to as the cat shield. You can see part of it, I think. Let's see if I can show parts of it. It is very improvised. So that gray bit next to Sherbet there is a draft excluder. It runs a pretty solid distance across the desk. It is there to block some gaps and sometimes act as a pillow, but, multi-purpose. That runs adjacent to an acrylic platform. It is, this one actually was marketed as something that you can lay across a keyboard to keep cats off of it. But it's too low. So it is propped up at about a 45-degree angle using a pair of modified measurement triangles. A tardigrade in a piece of moss in a forest in Ohio, or an elasmosaurus in a lake on the British Islands. I don't know what the second one is, so I can't really answer. I don't know that I would like to be a tardigrade because they are a very, very, very primitive form of life as far as their existence. So I can't speak to what such an existence would be like in reasonable terms. It is. So the first one would be too primitive of a creature, and the second one would be harassed by cryptid seekers and or killed by big game hunters with too much money or, ammo. Okay, so we need to capture some of this. It extends behavior. This one doesn't need a custom solo creation here. So this one does not encapsulate it does not handle the health by itself. That's going to be something that's handled in the player service so that it can be displayed. Sherbet is very cozy. It's got a very small amount of blep going on here. Okay. So then we need a handle message. Namespace level non-static function. Okay, so now we have an opportunity for us to go in and say the player is going to receive harm. Is this the version of a basilisk that is line of sight, poison gas? What are we talking? I mean, I don't know that I would pick the lizard-tailed chicken thing. There's also the basilisk that is still a lizard with a crown. And also we'd have to stipulate which kind of dragon we're talking about, because there is some popular fiction that gives dragons, like, godlike powers. Is it controlled petrifying vision? Similar with the fire breathing? I assume with the fire breathing, but is it your gaze upon or controlled? Then we'd have to go with dragon. Because if it's uncontrolled petrifying gaze, then, I mean, every organic thing that your eyes pass over calcifies. Fun thing, there is a series of books called The Laundry Files, which is sort of an urban fantasy, Lovecraft inspired, like kind of eldritch horror inspired thing. There are a lot of references to Cthulhu mythos stuff, but one of them is a basilisk concept. And they actually go into great detail about what the process physically is, like how it is instigated and some of the side effects. And one of them is the conversion to the solid, like again, it's kind of a calcification, was so exothermic that one of the common results was, as it is hardening, it explodes. Okay, so we also need our player state. Our actual player state. Sammy and Sherbet just came tearing by. There is that, both of them being very casual, but you can tell it's a bit of a play fight / chase going on, because you can see the tails whip. Though it is not the standoff. Do I find if I'm talking about the ability to eat rocks or drink lava, do I find these things delicious? Are we talking Discworld trolls, where different types of rock have flavor and quality of preparation? If you haven't read Discworld, read Discworld. The first couple books are kind of less coherent because they're still getting their feet under them, but the quality of the setting and the construction of the world by itself is amazing, and they manage to weave in some excellent social commentary that holds up very well. Okay, so we have that. What are we going to call this? A player state needs to... I mean, those are safe and varied enough flavors. Rock candy can be flavored to be other things. But I'd still go with rock, because rock is readily available. Is it called lava when it's deep underground, or is that when it's called magma? I know there's one of those semantic things related to liquid rock. Yeah, that would make it hard to obtain, and I'm not a fan of tropical environments. I have my, my circuitry to think about. Doesn't go there, it goes in the class. We are actually going to change this around. We are going to have it so that that the player state has its own handle message. And instead of collision player health, it is going to be a collision player player. And the player will hand this off to the player state. That way we don't need a lot of other objects to keep track of. The player just has a collision player handler, and it jobs that off. So we'll keep this for just a moment, but we need to structure this properly. This is the entity handling it, if I recall. Definitely going to need to have... We're definitely going to need to handle looking into better documentation. I'm not familiar with the snail of which you speak that has, metal scales. Photosynthesis would require me standing in the sun for protracted periods of time. And, see prior messages and general preference. Let's consider this. So a harm message has who did it. Okay, yeah. The message is who the message is for, is what the entity is dealing with, because that can be relevant. So this is not really necessary for the player state to handle a message is, currently. But one of the conveniences is if it's the player state and we're dealing with like couch co-op multiplayer implementation kind of stuff, this would let me determine which player are we talking about. Which is a cool coincidence. Now going to go into collision player and we say services.player_state.handle message that. We don't eat the message, but the player should not have anything else currently. By not eating the message, we allow that to be a thing, though. Some post additions to player behavior. That's for things like, oh, it could be knockback, that kind of thing. So then we need this one. Let's look at our enemy health again, because I think we're in the same territory. Yeah. Then a harm message. I mean, it should be apparent, but that's kind of what we got already. It's not like there's a lot of structural goopy bits. The bones you can see are structural framing of an exterior shell. You can be a lot more efficient on internal structure if you don't have to deal with goo. Perhaps meat. Okay, so we've got our harm message here. So the player, we're going to take damage. This one, why did we make this a void? Yeah, we should make this a Boolean. Okay. This is how the player state handles that. So this is entirely encapsulated. In the collision player, though, it's not encapsulated within just that function. We need to return the return of the player state handle message. So same way, every time we get hit, we take damage. Every time we get a harm message, we reduce our health by the damage. If the health reaches 0 or less, then we trigger the removal. Now, this will change. This part will change. Because we don't just remove the player. This is very likely to be a, play a death animation and end the run. Kick off the end game state. Scorecard, all that fun. But for now, we just remove the player. Where is it? Standard catalog. So we need to go down to our little blobby friends. And I assume all of these things are fully sentient. Our textures for the blobs. Okay, targeters, blah, 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 blah. Where's our load entities? Unicorns have a varied mythology and how they behave and what they do. Probably not, mer person. That implies a couple of things. Is one, living in the ocean. And, we haven't been good to the ocean. And within the ocean lie terrors. Are we talking like Skynet War Toaster? Like long-term self-modifying kind of thing? Like, it starts out as a toaster on wheels with a knife and it can adapt? It is... Where did I put those? Then the War Toaster. With the ability to self-modify, you at least have, after a particular period, a steady build-up. And I do like level-up games. Collision behavior. There, finally. We should make this collision harm is equal to new collision harm. Dot. Damage is equal to 1. Oh, we should feed this in directly. This is akin to health. We should just load that in. So this is, they have 3 hit points. They get knocked back 24 visual units when struck. We don't need to catalog those things because they vary per entity. Well, the specification did not say it was in a war. Which leads me to believe some mad scientist just came up with a toaster with a knife and unleashed it. But clearly that's fiction. Any sort of scientist or designer would never create something that would get out of control and potentially, take over a factory and cause it to come under its own control and spread an infected version of its own copies into the environment. It's a war toaster, but I mean, war machines can sit idle. And failing that, the mechanism of the upgrades was not specified, so I get to specify myself. And I choose horrible assimilation. Latch on to the nearest mechanical thing and begin ripping bits off of it. Add a collision harm. We need a constructor for that. Do I want to be able to have other properties of damage? We could extend them, but extending them... It could be a collection that we feed it of different types of damage. What I'm thinking of is right now we're looking at damage as a finite thing. I could have damage types incorporated, but let's keep it simple from a game design perspective. If I want to have essentially things like, oh, it does fire damage, we can just have it lights things on fire. What does fire do? It does damage. Okay, so we have a constructor with collision harm that takes an integer and sets it to that. Okay. One. Okay, now slimes do 1 damage, and if the player takes 3 hits, the player object should go away. Did I break it? Yes, I did. Int. Don't care. But we'll make the issues go away. Okay, we aren't getting any apparent collision with the player. Oh. Let's make sure we wire that up. I mean, being a sentient pipe is very limiting. Like, yeah, you might have all kinds of capabilities, but you'd be limited to, like, Morse code or something like that to communicate, and it essentially we'd be relying a lot on the sentient and magic and flying aspects. I mean, it's not the strongest nuke that we're talking about, but at the very least, the ultimate question with the nuke would be, do you have control over your own detonation? Because then you have a lot of leeway with just kind of hanging out wherever you want to be. Because nobody wants to get you angry or mess with you. You can't be captured or something like that because there's always the threat that you just go off. Essentially, your existence becomes a existential game of chicken. All right, let's load entities, enemies, and player. So here's our move player behavior. Behaviors dot add new collision player. Oh, excuse me. Okie doke. And the player is gone. There we go. So by doing this, this gives us one central location currently to handle the player's health and their reaction to it. We can separate this out into another function. We can also have things like a we effectively could have a timer where I take a hit and now I have how many iframes I get. So we are going to have I've never played Garten of Banban. It doesn't look impressive. Given the modifiers that you are placing on the gotcha life thing, then they both sound awful. So it's effectively a coin flip. Now, we could also turn it around to be you exist within the context of that setting, but not. But since it's not specified, we are not like transferred into it. Like we're not isekai'd into it. No truck-kun specified. So that could mean like you are not the protagonist under threat in Garten. You are not somebody outside of gotcha life. So in both of those cases, you would exist in a state of normalcy for yourself. Again, neither of them seem fun to me. But it's not like you'd just be sitting there from the outside or having to participate. Okay, so hello, buddy. We're going to make this a void. So this is the removal status. So when we create this, we set all of this stuff such that they're alive. Not alive. So this would be outright, did we take damage? If we took enough damage, we are removed and the alive state is set false. To use the iframes, we now need to add a physics process to player state. Doing that elsewhere. Let's look at our game state. What are we doing? So here we have our explicit call to physics update. Let's look at our collision. Where did I put that? Collision. We just have cleanup events in our collision manager. We look at shader based. Initialize, clean up. I can say with great happiness that I have never encountered either of those things. I'm aware of their existence, and I have seen still frames of them. But both this Skibbity and this Dingle strike me as things that I want no part of. Okay. We are going to go into our collision manager class. And we are going to have a handler for this. This has to be done. It doesn't care about time passed. We'll make it virtual. Because we're living in the strange place where there can be static elements to some of these. Like, there can be persisting aspects to a collision manager that we could deal with universally. I don't believe that one has any of them. I know the shader one does. Yeah, right here. These are our constants. These don't need to be static. These are constants. We should make some of these things static, but anyhow. If we make these virtual, we don't have to worry about this stuff. As in, we don't need an empty version. Doesn't care. It always says the message continues. Clarify, Patrick. Are we talking about the pink starfish Patrick of the SpongeBob world, or some other Patrick? Question as stated: Goomba or Patrick implies. Well, I'm also going to assume you're not saying something racist about Italians. But yes, the original question as proposed was probably a mushroom creature in the Mario world or some person named Patrick. I'm not opposed to the name Patrick, but I like Newt better. The choice between those, the pink starfish. Life expectancy and behavioral limitations of a Goomba are vast. Despite assuming that we talk about these entities as real creatures, then Patrick has the greatest potential for actual personal growth. So any negatives could eventually be turned around. Okay, so we have handle message, we have load player. By default, we also need okay, we need to accept change in time. Once again, predictive algorithms, folks. This is why any attempt to use AI for the entirety of your code base or even small problems requires the review of a capable human being. You need somebody to know that this is stupid. By default, this does nothing. So then we need a... It's akin to Activision has gotten in a lot of PR trouble recently for their use of AI art in real money microtransactions. AI art that had classic AI art problems, too many fingers, that kind of stuff. Weird textures and geometry. Things that any artist would have been able to catch very quickly. But clearly the the content pipeline that they had set up either provided no opportunity for that kind of oversight or excised it entirely. Is the question, is it the ability to, effectively increase the size of your entire body uniformly or decrease it, or is there another part of the question? Is it the request of increase or decrease? Or something else? This time... if frames are greater than 0, frames minus equals delta double if iframes is less than 0. Could I do this with single line code statements? The conditional question mark effect colon effect. Yes, I could. Those are way less readable than an if block and accomplish the exact same thing. All right, that's all this does. If there's iframes, reduce them. Iframes is less than or equal to 0, just in case. Then we do the check. So if at any point we set iframes, we need to move all of this. If iframes, okay. Iframes up here. Rid of that. Message dot damage. Message is a harm message. Message is a harm message. Dot damage. Thanks for swinging through, Florian. Okay. So what happens is the player object has a behavior handler that accepts the harm messages. If it gets those, it will pass that to the handle message of the player service, which, if it's a harm message, when it gets it up here, it is going to, well, the player collision passes all messages to this. If it gets a harm message, it will call this method here, which is if there are no iframes, we perform the damage calculation here. And if it's less than or equal to 0, we set the alive flag to false. So these are physics process iframes. These should be happening very consistently. So it is not a visual update thing. So okay. We're changing it to invulnerability time because I realized delta has nothing to do with a frame. Well, it does, but the number in delta is in seconds. So this is actually more accurate. So for 1 second, you can't be hurt. Actually, let's go out of control here for a moment. For 10 seconds, you can't be hurt. So then in the game, services, player state, dot pass time. Okay. It will take the player 10 seconds before they can be harmed again. We're slowly counting. Could have done this with smaller numbers, but... Oh, there we go. Okay. This gives us an implementation of how long it takes the player to be harmed again. We may have to move some of these up to the actual player state so that they are universals. This is a configuration value that we will use. For now, we're going to set that. And whenever we take a hit, we are going to set that. The reason I make it a separate variable is so that in the future we could have modifications that change how long you have invulnerability for. Will we keep that? I don't know. Did... Okay. I think... We'll have to figure out how we're going to change some of this stuff, but access level wise, that should be the truth and player state. The actual basic player state is the thing that has health, current health, and alive. Now, how we interpret those and how we interact with them is different. If we want iframes to be modifiable by an effect, then we would have to take that inside of the actual player state, because there would need to be a place that we change it. Because to make it so that you change this kind of thing, it can't be something that you fire on the fly. Because let's say a projectile had a single tick ability that said, hey, add some unit of time to iframes. That could result in kind of a loop of them. It's not like we could passively add an attribute with a projectile kind of stuff. Hello, Baileys. Welcome. So, for the time being, public constant double there we go. So now we can just set that to 1. It should take about 3 seconds for the player to go away once the blobs get to him. Taking way too long for that to happen. Way too long. Why did that take so long? So right here, we inflicted the harm, we added iframe time. We inflict harm. If we're at 0, we get removed. Strange. Let's check this again. For those that are curious, we are coding a Vampire Survivor style game in Godot We are using C# at this point. We have the damage done. Again. So invulnerability time has been increased. And again, this will be just hit 0. We call out to be removed. And it's gone. Okay, that was weird. More time. Okay. The collision is still taking longer than it should. Let's do plus new line, services, player state dot current health. All right. Third number is player health. Collisions are not properly happening here. Where's our standard inventory? Right, this is 10 times a second. We're going to change this down to 1 time a second here, so that there's a lot less on the screen. We can try to see what's going on. Okay. Center the cursor a little bit more. Okay, proximity thing. Okay, so player state. This is where it'll get tricky. If we have the concept of being able to retrieve the player, then we need this method to do something. There we go. By default, it just returns a new entity object that does nothing. Doesn't matter what you pass it. Okay. So then in our base player state, did players and players is equal to new array entity not we're just gonna preface this as such. So by building this, we're going to be able to have a variety of functions built into it, like get nearest, get nearest player kind of thing. So we load players. Player 0 is equal to this. Okay, so now we're going to create a single player object in this array, and we're going to load that. For the time being, this array has empty slots. That's fine. Entity get player. Time being are going to actually just force this over. 2 and 3. Okay, so we are going to make it so that you only ever are able to get the current max players. Okay. The count by default is 0. We are going to set this to max players, though. Might end up putting some of these elsewhere, but int max players, use max players. Okay. So whenever we load a player, we are going to if okay, so if we are not at maximum players yet, we set the slot accordingly. Then we will say player count ++. So every time we call load player, currently we are passing this in. This is going to have to change. We need settings for which player to load up. Some sort of catalog value. Okay, and then we are going to go over into state. Constants.entity player. I wonder if I have to do that if the default constructor, if the default declaration of this would carry it. I don't want it to do that. But it looks like populating that would be doing this. Okay. All right, what this is going to let us do is, in the game logic, define which players to load. So at the start of the game, I could have a list of these are the players in order. Basic player, special player 1, that kind of thing, so that the sprite, the entity, can change. Get your Vampire Survivors different characters going. Does it explode? We can solve some of the collision wonkiness with bigger hitboxes. Okay, that's functional. At our collision manager again. Check collisions. So instead of a physics process, all right, we never use delta in run shader. Made an error down here. Okay, we're removing this from the Godot delta, and we're going to go into our game here. We update physics and then services.collision manager.check collisions. All right, we tell the player that time passes. We tell the entities that the other, we tell the state that time passes. It passes. I can talk. We tell the entity list that time passes. And then we check for collisions. Thing is broken yet. Still working. There we go. All right, very basic player state setup here. Now, one of the things we can do is we can add a new movement behavior. Just gonna nab this whole mess here a moment. Nope, can't do that. If the message is time passed, okay. To entity dot position state dot get player 0 position minus. A. We are going to go into our player state. Say it's equal to 0. Base player state, we're going to say the same thing. you don't specify a player, it's the base player. Just so. What we're going to do to change this is we're going to say get closest to position and have a quick function that checks which of the player objects is closest to that position. It's not a free operation, but it should be relatively cheap, especially compared to move to cursor. All right, so now we need to go in and we need to create all of the trimmings associated with this. Here are our movements. Here is equal to move to player. No, I messed up. There is no such thing as move to player. There is such a thing as target player. Targeter. Okay. It's been a while since I created a targeter. Let's remind ourselves. They have an entity and a direction. Services dot like state dot get player. Then we go into move to player. Take this part. Is equal to that. Okay. So now we're going to get rid of move to player. So we don't need it. In the standard catalog, we have this fun one called move straight line. Let's load our targeter here. Let's get our constants. Item movement targeter. Public constant. constant for that. Simplicity, we are going to do this. These are regular comments. They are not summary. They are not summary comments. Those are they're indicators for the documentation build and internally, so that when you are looking up those values in the IDE, or when you tell it to generate documentation, that it will use things like this summary to help fill that out. This is that notation is generally for functions, and I need to make sure I'm not using it elsewhere because, one, the IDE won't like it as far as trying to do that. It will resist it, you know? But also, that's doing something I don't want it to do. Okay, we take this. Constants. Player, new target player. So then in our load movements, we have a move player. Here we have move straight line in a proposed direction. This is essentially speed up. This is a move straight line, but its targeter is targeter player. And we need a different movement constant for that. But, ooh. Player. Our standard catalog. So now we have a movement type that is moved to the player. So now when we load our entities, we've got our little blobby boy here. Move to... Wow, I hit all the wrong buttons. Move to the player. Oh, wow. Nyom. Well, that's not what it's supposed to do at all. Oh, oopsie doopsie. Oh, okay, okay. Direction is equal to direction dot normalized. The further the player was away, the faster the blobs would move. I think. Yeah. But if the player moves, blobs are also faster than the player, or as fast as the player. Nice. Nice. All right. So this is basic gameplay. Oh, but let's... Services. Player state. Dot. Get player. Top position. Isn't that neat? Okay, one of the things we're going to need to do is wire up entity states or entity animation states. One of the things we're doing right now to make it so that everything is not moving in lockstep is that there is a randomizing element to the animation frame that they're on. That was okay for the time being, but now we need to go in and say, this animation starts as of this moment. And change that value as we pass it in. That is going to change one of the shaders. In particular, let's find it. Where is that hiding? It should be in the... It's not in the entity group. It is in the renderer. In the mesh renderer. Sworn the shader would have been hiding in there. Which implies to me that it is... No. No. Okay. Rendering in shaders. Okay. Godot is hiding that folder. All right. So this is the ID of the entity we're passing in. That's not what we're going to do. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the animation frame. I'm sorry, the time that the animation started at. Because this is our current time constant. We want... this is the time since the program started. We need to be able to get the corresponding value outside and store it in the entity's current state such that whenever we set an animation, that value is populated and it then gets passed in the instance custom value, which lives over in here when we are rendering the process stage. This is some fun stuff that Tass helped us with. The fantastic, what is it called? Link? Yeah. These can be useful, but they also degrade readability pretty fast. It's a balance because they do cool stuff. Where are we setting that? Ah, here we go. So a color gives us 4 values we can pass in. The only reason I believe that we use entity ID is, for this purpose, is to offset the animation frame. Interesting. Cute little bit of trivia. So in the YouTube chat, that awesome emote works just fine. It is the... it always looked to me like, massive grin, rolled eyes. But in my chat aggregator, my streamer bot thing, it does not come through. It comes through as its emote code, :awesome:. It does not parse the emotes. I'm sure there's like a toggle. Is there a toggle? There is not. Anywho. So we're going to end up changing that. That way, what we can do is we can have in its properties, is it moving? Let's go back over into our renderer friend here. And one of the elements is an entity mesh. Man, it's going to be good. There's so much code cleanup we can do with things like this. We don't need to get the catalog stored. We do not need to pass in these service level things because everything has access to them. But anyhow. So we have our facing, that's handled by the transforms, all of that goodness. Right here, we can determine things like animations. We could also do that in like the entity logic where it sets its animation, that kind of thing. So I could have a new message that we could subscribe to that is on like entity animation change. And it would set the animation index and then record a timestamp. But yeah, let's check a couple of things here. Okay. Let me look up something real quick here. Interesting, but not what I'm trying to read here. think this is what I want. Okay. What I'm reading is that's not going to be easy. But is doable. Okay. To make that work, we're going to need to leverage several things. But first, quick break. And we're back. Okay, so one of the things that might be considered is, oh, but why don't we just change the animation directly based on the logic and that on whether it's moving? So we can look at the proposed movement of an entity at any given time and say, oh, it's moving or not. If proposed movement is non-zero, it's moving. Well, the problem with that is that would preclude us from being able to have fixed duration animations. So let's say I want to have an explosion sprite on the screen. I don't want the explosion sprite to start in the middle, play to the end, and wrap around. I want it to play for its whole duration and stop starting from the beginning. So I don't want its index to be messed with. And I want it to play out in its entirety and then stop. So what we need, we have the texture index. We have which animation we're using. So which texture do we have? Right now we allow for 100 different textures and a series of animations. I don't know. Yeah. So each of the textures also has a number of frames that its animation follows. Like how many animations are in this. So we'd have which texture it is, which animation we're using out of its possible animations. And then we are going to say it's the time that has passed and whether we should loop. Okay. So again, which texture is it? Of all the sprites in the game, which one is it? One of the big assumptions in this is that all sprites are technically the same size. Even an itty-bitty one will be rendered at the same size. I'm sorry, we will create them at the same size. So even a teeny tiny sprite is actually going to be, like right now, like 4 pixels in, a 2x2 sprite would still actually be created as a 16x16, just with a lot of dead space. Is that great? No, but we're dealing with, at most, if I get stupid ambitious, 128 squares. 32 is already going to be some art that I have to learn to do. That is, I'm better at super low res kind of visual interpretation style sprites. This implies a thing. I do think there's a charm to the super low res, but we have actually already hit limitations on it. To convey the information we want, we're already out of space. Those yarn balls are close to the entirety of the space we have, given that we're operating in 16x, But anyway, okay, so we set the texture index. So this is our red, green, blue, alpha. Where we will set these varying values to these things. We have floats coming in, but the only one that's going to be left as a float is the time sense. this one will be, these two will be converted to integers, and the loop or not is going to be converted to a Boolean. So this is a 0 or 1. These are just, flatten it into an integer. Yeah. So time passed. To get that, we need an animation started. To get an animation started, we need to have some way of indicating that. I think outside of special cases, we shouldn't be changing that much. Okay, so we have a separation of functionality thought here. Right now, the entity mesh handles a lot of, like, what kind of rendering we're doing, or what values to use. So it's the thing that is the intermediary between an entity and the rendering system. What is our identifier? What is our, where is our position? Where are we facing? Which animation to use? And are we facing to the right? Is the sprite flipped or not? So, like, right here, we update the facing direction. We check and see, does it rotate to face? If it rotates to face, we don't care. It's in that case, it's based entirely on its direction. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's facing in this case. Otherwise, we are going to look at it and say, is it a negative number? If it's a negative number, then we're facing left. We're not facing right. Otherwise, we are. One thing this does is, if the value hasn't changed, if this hasn't changed, then we don't change it. I'm sorry, if we have been moving and we stop, such that our facing value now has zeros in it, then what we end up with here, let's position updated. Our facing is where we're moving. If we stop moving and we hold still, our facing X is going to be 0. Since it's not less than 0, facing right will be true. It will snap back to facing right. I don't know that we really want that. So let's just make a quick change. 1 second, actually. We're going to make a quick commit. That was more changes than I should have stacked, but we need to make a timestamp, So if it's an else condition at the moment. Right buttons. The IDE trying to be helpful, working against me. This will actually never change, so if we're not rotate to face, we're going to mess with these values. Okay, so the change here. Hey, Lunar. Would be interesting to have a Lost Woods puzzle where it wasn't actually a Lost Woods. Where there were literally specific rooms that each one went to, you know? You'd have to have teleport gates to pull it off, but having them actually all be unique rooms, even some of the double backs, would be kind of hilarious. So it seems like you've been warped back to the beginning, and it does have an exit gate in the same location, but it's actually a different room, and the other doors continue to do different things. But the change we've made is, if we don't rotate to face, and we are facing left, then we're going to set facing right to false. If we're if we're moving left, then we set facing right to false. If we're moving right, facing right is equal to true. If it's 0, we don't change facing right. Which will mean is if I'm moving left and I stay moving left, if I'm moving left and I stop, I stay facing left. All right. So let's start with handling the animation entirely in here. It's not vector 2, 0, then animation. It's 1. Else. Okay. Now we're going to look at our mesh renderer. Pass in its animation. I think I've got all the sprites where this is okay. Okay, the yarn balls are rotate to face type. So we need to make sure that that logic is actually in there. Okay, it's in the transform that we need to deal with here. This transform needs a facing kind of thing, which I think is the skew. No, that's its rotation value. Texture wrapper dot rotate equal to to it's a float. There we go. See, we've got our walk cycle for the little guy going. See how many of these we can purge here. Okay, oh. Is that happening? Okay, this only happens when we update its position. If its position doesn't update, we won't change the animation. Time being, okay, get our setter in place. Spacing is what matters here. This is not correct. This is not how I want it to work. We ultimately want the entity to bubble up what the animation is. We want an on animation changed, and that inside the entity it changes its state. Am I moving? Am I dying? That kind of thing, you know? So right now, this never gets set. Here, we're going through and saying, oh, no, when you ask for it, this is what you're going to get. No, something's wrong. I broke it. I super broke it. Oh. See what I did? I'm setting the values within the getter. Well, more importantly, I'm returning that value within its getter. So we're getting a constant we're getting a referential loop. I think this will make it work. Nope. Because our facing isn't actually resetting. We need to go through and we need to change the entity to report what its animation is based on an internal state. Gonna do this. Okay, first we need a new event. We need to define. Entity, iterate through all of our behaviors. this is where we're going to rate to handle our animation. Zero and return animation. Movement does not equal vector 2, 0. Animation is 1, and if animation is, yeah, then when the physics update comes through, this is where we handle the actual movement. Let's get our actual event wired in here. The animation changed event. And then we are going to, if this is populated, we are going to raise it during this. We will be constantly updating this animation. Then in the mesh, animation changed plus equals do that, and then we are going to on entity animation changed. And we're having entity in there just in case. We may not actually need that. The event. Now we reset when we're holding still. And if we take enough hits, we will go away. Nice. Nice. This is still awkward, but this gives us room to play here. Having entity here means that we have the opportunity to query information about the entity in addition to receiving the animation. Similarly, I could put position information after that, but it could be if an entity moves, we don't actually care about the position in the facing. There's something else we want to know. As such, we could have not have the animation, and we could have an animation on the entity. We'll figure that out later. But yeah. We've made some headway here, folks. Let's get this running. Move that. We're going to get these nice little tight spin patterns here, which have more coverage. So this is a once a second we emit projectiles. There will be some projectiles that go faster than this, but 1 time a second we are emitting an enemy. 1 time a second we are emitting the projectiles, and we are, from this projectile, we're emitting 27 at a time. It takes 3 of the projectiles to knock out one of the little blobby dudes. And we can move around a little bit. There's something off about the rotate in logic. It's behaving very differently than... No. It's that when you're at dead center, it's behaving differently than if you move off to the side. Now I need to know what's going on. So right here, the starting point is right at 0, 0. But if I step away, the projectiles are all curving up and right. That should not be the case. Which means there's something about the centering logic that is behaving differently in the rotate. That is a problem for another day. Oh, but good times. We have got the idea of player health wired in. Player can take damage. We have the idea of iframes wired in. We can set a period of time where the player can be hurt again. We already have logic in place that we could say when the player gets hit, they get knocked back. Now, we may have to update that kind of thing where if the iframes eat a take a hit and they're active, that it eats the message and essentially invalidates that message. But we'll have to see. But we could have things like, even with iframes, if you get hit, you get pushed. I kind of want to add that in for funsies. Let's add that in for funsies. Will this be a actual end state? I don't know, but we're going to add it. So this is how the blob gets knocked back on hit. We are going to have the player get knocked back on hit now. Same distance. We are going to give the player a little bit of durability to account for this. Okay, If a blob collides with you, regardless of whether you take damage, it should push you. Boop, 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 boop. Yep, we've got health, we've got player knockback, we've got iframes tasks, we got stuff. What if in the catalog, instead of 24, we say 1? Itty bitty push. It just looks like you're actually moving. Nice. Nice. There we go. Good times, though. The animation handling logic does need to be cleaned up, but for the time being, there's really only the idle or moving states. We can have others when we get there. I would like to next wire in a health display. Orion, we are... Oh, we still got time. We're making a Vampire Survivor style game. That is, you know, you move around, you fire bullets out, enemies come towards you, kind of thing. A weapon construction system. Where, and this is, you know, early alpha level UI that we've got going here, but based on what I put in the weapons set here, the projectiles behave differently. More of them. I can have a preliminary movement type. Move this and we can swap it and get different behaviors. I don't have any of the weapons wired in that would really help this situation much. This is 27 projectiles formed by 3 immediate consecutive fans of 3. So this is a fan of 3 in a 90-degree arc, where each of those 3 split into 3 in a 90-degree arc, and so on. So if you look, there's some heavy overlap in the middle ones. Currently, the enemies are doing a complicated spiral pattern. Just as many enemies, and you can see because of the way the enemies move, they're fanning out a little bit. Change the projectile movement. Every time they touch the player, they shove the player around a little bit, and the player takes damage once a second. We're getting a bit of a vortex forming here. But this is one of the fun things, is not only can I use this behavior, this whole behavior chain logic for how the player moves and attacks, but the same thing for when the enemies spawn is this could be an event. You know, spawn the blobs in big lumps and have them spiral in with the player being the center. It is neat stuff. It's been a bit. I am calling this still the 100th dev stream that we've done. Because the last one got wildly cut short because of, delay by cat. Cat cam's being stubborn. Work with me, camera one. There we go. Exactly, Taz. Didn't count. Do over. That's why this one is 100B. But we're moving along. We have actually reached gameplay at the moment. We don't have an actual game over process. We don't even have a start the game process. It just leaps right in, predefined blob of items, that kind of thing. We also don't have the camera wired to follow the player. That's another thing that we can very easily do, but have not yet done. We'll get there. We'll get there. But in any event, folks, I hope you had a good time coding with us today. If you like what you saw and would like to see more, remember to like, follow, subscribe, comment, all of those good buttons. Just, press them. It helps the channel grow and it'll help you see stuff like this in the future. With all that said, though, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.